Some dare call it conspiracy.
Welcome to Chemtrails on Trial, an 8-part series produced by Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. If you would like access to the entire series right now, join us on patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy. The following episode deals with the conspiracy theory. This is episode 5.
On the internet, there is a certain amount of evidence of chemtrails, and the main thing that's put around is pictures of the actual canisters or the supposed canisters where these chemicals are stored before they're pumped out. And there's several photos that exist of aircraft with the seating removed or partially removed, and it's full of large tanks that either resemble kegs or gas canisters, and they're where the seats would normally be. There's a few. There's one from
I've seen these.
There's one from 1994 that shows silver kegs. There's one from as early as 1969 that's on a 747 and it's got two men in glasses inspecting it, which would imply that basically, they'd been planning this for a lot longer than we would think.
And a lot of people know about it.
Well, they must do, mustn't they?
Yeah.
But again, you could make the argument that they've decompartmentalized it in the same way that they do in NASA or, whatever. Like, that people don't fully understand the scope of or the consequences of what will happen. There's one on a 777 that shows gold kegs, and there's one from a Boeing 747 that shows black tanks. There's one from an A380 Airbus that has olive green or blue tanks. And so there's loads and loads of these pictures. In 2003, concerned citizens petitioned the Canadian government due to chemtrails adversely affecting health. And the response from the Canadian government was that chemtrails is a popularized expression and there is no scientific evidence to support their existence. Well, but of course they would say that because to admit it would be to admit that they actually cause ill health. In 2005, Elliot Morley of DEFRA, which is the UK sort of head of the Environment Agency, it's the government agency that oversees that, was asked by Labour Party member David Drew about research into chemtrails. And the response was that the department is not investigating chemtrails from aircraft as they are not a scientifically recognised phenomenon. So again, denial from the Canadian government, denial from the American government, denial from the UK government. And in his 2008 book, Above Top Secret, Jim Mars, everyone remember Jim Mars, chap with the hat and the beard? He looks a bit like the bloke that owns Jurassic Park. Well, I don't think he did.
Richard Attenborough.
That's him, yeah. In his 2008 book, Above Top Secret, he cites a 2007 Louisiana TV news show for KSLA, where reporter Jeff Ferrell tested water beneath chemtrails and found high levels of barium, which was 6.8 parts per million, which is 3 times the safe level. So there's some photographic evidence, there's denial from governments, and there's evidence in soil and water of barium and of aluminium. Germany, on RTL News in December 2007, according to the theory, admitted to the spraying of chemtrails. And this is a video that's out there. It's in German, but it's luckily subtitled. And it basically usually comes under... The subtitles say, meteorological radar registers the presence of a cloud, but it is not clear how this happened. The answer seems to be that this was the result of a military experiment. But what are these mysterious trails? The military planes of the German Federal Army are manipulating our climate. This is what weather researchers are presuming, and their suspicions are now confirmed. Sinister clouds of up to 350 kilometers long appear all of a sudden on the radar, and they interview a meteorologist called Carsten Brandt. And he says, the Federal Army is manipulating the meteorological maps, we can state with 97% certainty that we have on our hands chemtrails comprised of fine dust containing polymers and metals that are used to disrupt radar signal. This is the main purpose, but I was surprised that this artificial cloud was so widespread. And it also says that the registers report emissions of chemtrails at low altitudes. So that seems to be a pretty much of a smoking gun. So whereby, UK government, we don't know anything about it. Canadian government, these don't even exist. German government apparently admitted to it to RTL. And it was shown on a news broadcast, or at least that's what the translation shows. There's also a degree of video evidence, like, for example, there's pilots admitting to it. There's a video from 2010 that shows a KC-10 with several trails coming off it, and it's being followed by a passenger jet. And the pilot of the passenger jet starts filming it and says, you can see them spraying the chemtrails. Again, this is a genuine video. These are genuine pilots, and they genuinely say, following this KC-10, and we know from William Thomas's stuff, the KC-10s are the military refueling jets. You see them spraying the chemtrails. There's a 2014 video that shows a landing plane that has forgotten to turn the chemtrails off. It's spraying huge amounts of stuff as it comes into land. Also in the same year, there's a chap called Chris Bovey, and he's got a very powerful video of a plane landing in Sao Paulo, and they forgot to turn the chemtrails off, so they're pumping out these chemtrails whilst on the ground. That particular one's been viewed more than 3 million times. There's another one in Japan, an accidental chemtrail release in Japan that shows, again, same thing. They've forgotten to turn the chemtrails off. And this is very concerning. There's something called Operation Indigo Skyfold, which is apparently, this was a document that was released on the internet. And it's apparently a secret chemtrails pilot in December 2014. And he talks, or he whistleblows about chemtrails. And he's been told, as a chemtrail pilot, that this is actually a security program to prevent foreign weaponry, advanced exotic foreign weaponry. And it's almost like a sort of shield that is protecting the USA. But he actually believes that it's a genocide program. And the earliest chemtrails footage that I can see is from 1923. And what it shows, there's a warship in the water, and this plane turns up next to it, and it drops a trail next to it of chemicals. And it seems to it's very, very low, and it seems to fall towards the sea and creates a wall of white smoke, which seemingly envelops this warship. Whether they were using this as a sort of experiment to see if they could poison people on the ship like that, the video itself doesn't make it absolutely clear. But as we can see, there's video evidence. There's also people who've got really decent credentials that actually believe in chemtrails. The person mostly associated with this is Dr. Rosalie Bertel. She's also known as the anti-nuclear nun. Now, that doesn't mean that she's like a superhero or anything. She's just opposed to nuclear power, and she's also a nun. She died in 2012, unfortunately. She's an American scientist, author, environmental activist, epidemiologist, and also Catholic nun of the Grey Nuns of the Sacred Heart. So, an eclectic range of interests. But she worked in environmental health since 1970, and in 1986 she was awarded the Right Livelihood Award for raising public awareness of the destruction of the biosphere and human gene pool, especially by low-level radiation just after Chernobyl. So this woman knows her stuff. She genuinely knows her stuff about radiation and things like that. She was also help victims of Chernobyl's radiation. She set up the International Medical Commission in Bhopal after the Union Carbide pesticide factory explosion. That was a major disaster where huge amounts of people were affected by a chemical plant explosion that essentially was sort of covered up by, well, not covered up, but like no one was really sort of like held to task for it. It was a terrible, terrible thing.
It was a really terrible thing. They had like 10 safety systems, and because or the maintenance was so bad and the corruption was so bad, none of them actually worked.
Yeah, precisely. And it was a load of very, very poor people that end up dying. And I think it's caused sort of problems throughout generations, even basically. So, you know, it's not a good thing. She's also worked with victims of US atomic bomb tests. So she's a good guy. She's a really good person. In May 2005, Snowshoe Films interviewed her about chemtrails. And she said,
I think they're also a carrier for all kinds of biological and chemical warfare. I think that they're getting people used to seeing these things, and they're getting the military used to doing it. I think most people have noticed chemtrails because it's not natural to have something crisscrossing in your sky and staying around for hours. And so they could combat global warming this way. So one of the things they're trying to do, apparently, is put metal particles into the air. They fall down, you know. It's kind of crazy, but anyway, that's one of the reasons. Chemtrail looks like a jet fume, but the jet discharge only lasts for about 15 or 16 seconds, whereas the chemtrail lasts for hours. And you can also see it keeps getting wider and wider, and if you look at it closely, it's dripping things. I found that the approach of our government to chemtrails is twofold. One is they think if they put metals up there over places where there were cities or groups of people, they could deflect the sun's rays back up again. The other is what they're calling aerial pharmacopoeia. And they're using as their precedent the fact that people started adding iodine to salt in order to prevent goiters in areas that had low salt. So they said this has a precedent. So there are all kinds of things going on with these chemtrails.
So she speculates that basically it's kind of like adding fluoride to water. It's a government program to inoculate people, but at the same time, she's speculating that it could be weather modification. But she clarifies.
I think they're outrageous. They don't belong in our sky, and they're probably messing up things they don't even know about. And we don't need this kind of, dosing the population with unknown chemicals. They totally deny it. They just say it's just the exhaust from a jet motor. But I saw them over Paris. It's over Geneva. It's in England. It's in Belgium. They're doing this all over the earth.
And so that's Dr. Rosalie Bertel, the anti-nuclear nun, who also puts her weight behind chemtrails.
Hello, initiates of the Some Dare Call It Conspiracy podcast. Dom Jolly here. How are you? Sorry to butt in, but I just wanted to let you know that I've written, a book that I'm very, very proud of called The Conspiracy Tourist, in which I travel around the world taking a look at the weird world of conspiracies, and I think you might like it. Not only that, but I'm touring the book and doing live shows all around England from the 28th of Feb to the end of March, and it would be smashing to see you there. I think you'd like it. If you are interested, go to my website, www.domjolly.tv. And now, on with the podcast. Thanks.
I had to put this up because this has been shared a lot recently. It was shared by David Icke on his website under the title, Chemtrails Are Conspiracy Fact. And this is an interview or a presentation by former US Air Force industrial hygienist Kristen Megan. And this was conducted in January of 2014. Now, the place that she's putting this talk on, it is a talk that's put on by the Oath Keepers. You know, those wacky far-right guys that have just been sent to prison for sedition. Elmer Rhodes and Kelly Meggs.
Are you kidding me?
No, seriously, it was put on by the Oath Keepers and partly by a lady called Gigi Bowman, who was running for state senate, and she's a quite hardcore libertarian, apparently. So, yeah, I mean, that's a little bit of a red flag with a sort of black circle and a white bit of black swastika.
Brilliant.
But anyway, let's not get bogged down with fascism. Like she says,
as it was presented to you, I'm here to speak to you about geoengineering. First thing I want to ask you is, who doesn't believe it exists? Anybody here on the fence? Okay. Well, hopefully when you leave here today, you don't just believe it. You share the information that I'm going to share with you, and you get more people on board to stop this unethical crime. The first thing people ask me about geoengineering is, who are these people? Who are the people that are, kind of pushing the button to get this thing going? One of them, his name is David Keith.
And I don't know if you remember, but David Keith is the geoengineering fellow that was mentioned heavily in Why Twats. And he's the guy that basically is involved in geoengineering. And she claims that his book, Geoengineering, exposes these things to the truth movement, but they present it as a case for climate engineering. So she starts the video of David Keith talking about using sulfuric acid to reduce global warming by reflecting sunlight. It's a similar technique to the alumina one, but it involves sulfuric acid, which I have to admit, on the surface, like that does sound a bit dangerous. For a start, what if we burn a hole through the firmament? All the water will fall out. So these are things that people just haven't considered. Anyway, her job with the US Air Force was to do chemical compliance and to be an industrial hygienist. Basically, she's checking what chemicals are ordered and making sure that they're handled correctly and that there's a justification for their use. Because sometimes people will get chemicals and not know that they're really dangerous and use them in ways that aren't. So there's a fairly standard kind of job in chemical compliance for the Air Force. But sometimes as well, chemicals that you get are banned. So you're not really allowed to use them. So this is her job. He's basically just checking to see that the stuff that they're getting isn't going to get them into illegal hot water or harm any of the people working with it. And she said, to be honest, I hadn't actually heard of chemtrails, but it's all right because she went online and did her own research. She doesn't say that, but she does say that she went online. Anyway.
To summarize it, in an attempt to debunk this conspiracy theory as I thought it was, I didn't debunk it. It literally changed my life. One day I was going through that computer system, which if you want to look it up, it's called an Air Force Form 3952. It is the approval of hazardous materials. I was finding tons and tons of large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium in the forms of oxides and sulfates.
And she says that because she'd been looking into chemtrails and because she'd seen that these were the chemicals that were found in the soil samples and the air samples and the water samples, that she banned these chemicals from being purchased by the US Air Force. At this point, she also claims that she's an officer and that she's well decorated. And she implies that she really should know what she's talking about. And she also claims to have used an air sampler and a soil sampler once she sort of knew about chemtrails, and she'd found high levels of these contaminants. She then compares herself to Edward Snowden, which is always your standard humble brag. Anyway,
I've had pilots come forward. I've had people come forward that actually load the canisters on the planes.
And so this is it, basically. She worked for the Air Force. She noticed they were buying all these chemicals. She did her own tests and apparently found lots of these in various places. And she advises very, very strongly against taking information from one particular source. And this is somebody that we know. She says,
so one thing I want to tell you is what you can do about it. The biggest hurdle that we have is disinformation sites. I never say them, but I'm going to today. It's Metabunk and Contrail Science. Those are two websites that are ran by a government shill named Mick West.
Wow. Don't go to the fact checkers. Don't go to the people who know what they're kind of talking about.
Now, we know Mick. Mick's a nice guy. I've never...
Mick's great.
I asked Mick for some advice on this, so that's this podcast immediately tainted.
We've been influenced by the government, haven't we?
Infiltrated, absolutely. But yeah, but she really has got a bee in her bonnet about Midwest. So essentially, that's the evidence of chemtrails. There's one more thing that somebody keeps posting. This is a list that is posted. These are previous programs, apparently, that prove chemtrails. Okay. For example, one was called Operation Large Area Cover. There was another one that was called Operation Popeye, Project Storm Fury, Project Cirrus, Operation Hailstone, Operation Silver Fox, Operation Ranch Hand, and Operation Red Hat. And all of these are seen as evidence that chemtrails exist. They are previous programs that are cited as proof that chemtrails are real.
I think the guy who named them deserves a raise, personally.
Absolutely, they're all things. But these are, and again, these are all real. These are all real Air Force programs, and that would tie in with what Kirsten said, and she would know because she was an officer in the Air Force.
You're someone who's researched a lot of these operations and projects and all that stuff. Why do they always have such stupid names? Is there a reason for it?
Well, I don't know, really, to be quite honest. I think they just have to sort of make them up. I don't know whether they're random generated or what. I don't know, if I'm really honest.
I thought it'd be funny if there was an actual answer for that. So yeah, what do you think then so far, Ivor, with all the evidence laid out?
To be fair, I mean, it's looking a lot more substantial in a lot of ways than other sort of theories like the Lizard Illuminati or other ones you've covered.
Yeah.
There's, quite a few real government documents being presented here. Yeah, it's looking more substantial.
Well, yeah, I mean, it certainly does. And, as far as we can see as well with this particular one, nobody's got like an axe to grind, so to speak. These people seem genuinely concerned. There doesn't seem to be a grift or a con or even, just a contrarian position. They've seen something that they think is strange. They've looked for documents that would support what they believe it is. They've done experiments that show the potential detrimental effects of said programs. And they've formulated a case.
I think so far from what you've been saying to me, it seems like the beginnings, like the 90s, like up until say about 2010 with YTWATs, the people involved become increasingly less believable to me. If we go back to that very beginning bit, it feels like there's something kind of real going on.
Yeah.
But the further we get, it seems to be like people jumping on it who have other...
The motivation isn't clear. So quite a lot of people would see it as you said right at the beginning, it's there to sort of bolster the concept of global warming. And that would be tied into, say, Agenda 2030 or the World Economic Forum or, making us eat books, because their theory is that global warming doesn't exist, that it's a hoax or whatever. And so in their search for an explanation for chemtrails, basically, that's the problem, is because it becomes the further away you move from the documentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least with the sort of geoengineering thing, that these are real documents, these are real proposed ideas, and with YTWATs and various other things, there appear to be actual sort of solid evidence, some sort of tangible thing that actually sort of ties it all together and at least presents a case. And particularly if you're coming from the perspective that we don't trust the government, then this is one of those things where, I could see why people would be willing to believe this. There's a lot of aerial phenomenon. There's definitely something happening. And there's documents that might explain it. And the only sort of denial comes from people that fundamentally we don't believe.
Mm. Well, let's pick it apart next week then.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to Chemtrails on Trial, produced by Brent Lee and Neil Sanders for Some Dare Call It Conspiracy. And don't forget, if you can't wait for next week, do join us on patreon.com/somedarecallitconspiracy, where you'll not only be able to get the entire series right now, but also ad-free episodes, plus tons of other goodies, including my music, Neil's books, audiobooks of Neil's, and art by Nicholas C. Gray. You can also find all our links at www.somedarecallitconspiracy.com.